Good day, EAPP Tributes! Welcome to English for Academic and Professional Purposes. I am Mrs. Charsol John H. Casala, your teacher at the EAPP Arena. So before we proceed with our main lesson for this week, let us have a revision stop first. When we say revision stop, we have to review some of the things that is a little bit confusing in both parts, and some of the questions that you have raised in the private messenger. So this is about caution language, elaborating more on the adverbs, modal verbs, and modal adverbs. So there's a bit of confusion that we have encountered during last week. So this is about the use of widely in caution language. So before we proceed with the discussion of that particular example, let me just reiterate that in the sample words that we need to use in order for us to avoid sweeping generalization, it is clear over there that we can use adverbs of frequency and modal adverbs. So it's just that in the examples that we have taken from the references that we had, it's just that we weren't able to provide specific terms. We have just included open and close parenthesis adverbs, which might bring confusion or which brought confusion to each and every one. So let us first discuss what modal adverbs first. So again, modal adverbs are words that we use in order to avoid sweeping generalization or overgeneralizing things. So modal adverbs, if one of the key jobs of adverbs is to add the meaning of the verbs, it makes sense that modal adverbs add additional meaning to modal verbs. Remember that modality has to do with ideas such as possibility or something that is happening. So again, modal adverbs are used and not only adverbs to avoid sweeping generalization. So in order for us to use modal adverbs, we have to have modal verbs within the sentence. So let me just highlight that modal adverbs are included in a sentence with the modal verbs. So let us define what modal verbs are. So what is a modal verb? So in grammar, modality has to do with the properties such as possibility, obligation, and emphasis. Before we talk about modal verbs, let's review modal verbs. The main modal verbs in English language are can, could, may, might, must, shall, should, will, and would. So these verbs are auxiliary verbs which modify the meaning of another verb in the sentence. Certain other verbs are sometimes but not always referred to as modal verbs, such as ought, had better, and in certain uses, dare and need. So again, when we use modal adverbs, there should be the presence of these modal verbs within the sentence. So to exemplify, let me move to the next slide. So to be more specific, this is an example sentence that some of you were a little confused at. So it is widely accepted that having faith in God will make things possible. So some of you were able to answer that this is an example of caution language because of the use widely accepted, which is an adverb. So let me just reiterate that in caution language, adverb of degree and extent is not counted, as it can signal opposing generalization. So it can signal sweeping generalization as well. So if you will notice as well, widely is an adverb, you are correct, and the verb that is present in the sentence is fully accepted, meaning widely is not an example of modal adverbs because it doesn't modify a modal verb. So to give you an example of modal adverbs are certainly, definitely, clearly, probably, possibly, perhaps, and conceivably. We also have adverbs of frequency which are often, sometimes, usually, and such. So same rule applies with modal adjectives and adjectives. So if you use adjectives alone in the sentence, it doesn't count as a word to solve sweeping generalization. It's just an adjective to describe something. But if you are to use modal adjectives, you might use certain, definite, clear, probable, possible, and such. So again, This sentence, "It is widely accepted that having faith with God will make things possible," is surely or definitely, most definitely, an example of objective language or the attribute of objectivity because of the it construction. So it cannot be considered caution language because widely accepted, widely alone is just an adverb and not modal adverb. So if we will reconstruct the sentence and make it under caution language, we can say that it could probably be accepted by people that having faith with God will make things possible. So we have probably as the modal adverbs, and we also have the could for modal verbs. So they go together in a sentence. So another revision for the sentence to make it caution language, or to make it use the language of caution, is this: perhaps it may be accepted that having faith with God will make things possible. So I hope that this concept has already been clear. Thank you very much for listening and understanding this revision stuff. We are now down to our lesson and focus for weeks 2 and 3, which represents lessons 2 and 3 entitled Text Structures and Thesis Statements. Here are the most essential learning competencies for this lesson. Melk number 2 uses knowledge of text structure to glean the information that he or she needs and states the thesis statement of an academic text. And here are the learning objectives. Learning objective number 1. Familiarize yourselves with text structures and thesis statements. Learning objective number 2. Determine the various text structures used in different passages. And learning objective number 3. Identify the thesis statement of a given academic text. So, what is text structure? So, text structure refers to how the information within a written text is organized. So, if you will notice in your previous years in high school, you were able to identify some parts of a sentence, like if there's a noun, a verb, or a receiver of the action, something like that. So, text structures are also like that. So, any written text has its form depending on the writer's purpose and the writer's choice of structure. So, mind you class that this strategy, being able to know the structure of a text that you are reading, will help you understand the text better and will help you identify and will help you compare or contrast the literary text or the academic text that you are reading. So this strategy helps you understand that the text might present a main idea and details. It can present a cause and its effects, and or different views of a topic among others. So the most common academic text structures are as follows. We have 2 common academic text structures. We have the 3-part essay structure and the IMRAD structure. So for the 3-part essay structure, this is the usual IBC format, or the introduction, body paragraph, and the conclusion part. This format is actually used in literary text and in essays that we write. But in academic text, we also do abide by this structure. Now let's proceed with the second type, which is called the IMRAD structure. It's called IMRAD because of the words introduction. We proceed with methods, results, and discussion. So, in comparison with the 3-part essay structure, IMRAD structure is used in technical papers and academic one that you write for research and for lab reports and something like that. So let's elaborate these 2 academic text structures. Let's proceed first with the first type, which is the 3-part essay structure. This is the basis of all formal and informal writing. So, introduction, you know for a fact that in the introduction, we state the issuer, topic, reason or purpose of the writer for writing the text. So, in the introduction, for academic text and formal writing, or written text, formal written text, it is but evident and important that you have to state the issue or topic or the thing that you are talking about within the academic text. So unlike in creative writing text, there are some introductions that do not observe this kind of thing. But since we are under academic text or EAPP, you have to state the issue or topic head-on in the introduction part. So number 2 is the body paragraph, elaboration or explanation of the topic. This is where you provide supporting details, elaboration, explanation of the topic, samples and kinds of the topic, illustrations, and clarifications, and the like. So the last part of the 3-part essay structure, of course, is the conclusion. It's actually the summary of the ideas presented in the paper. When we say summary of ideas, it doesn't mean that you have to tap again or rewrite again the parts that you have written in the body and introduction for summary. You don't have to specify all the ideas that you've made mention in the body paragraph in the summary. So when we say summary, it's the general summary or general construction of ideas and opinions that is based on the main topic. So you don't have to say exactly what you have said in the body or paragraph. And for the conclusion, it explains briefly how these ideas are connected to one another. So its connection, its purpose, its summary is embedded in the conclusion part. Let's now move on with the IMRAD text structure. So this is commonly used in writing scientific articles or reports. At times, we also use this IMRAD structure in the construction of our reports for research. So number 1, introduction states the status of a current phenomenon or the status of the problem or the scientific problem that you are investigating on. Number 2, we have the methods. Explain the process on an author reached or on how the author reached the results of his or her study or investigation. You have to elaborate the processes that you went through, that you did, and explain what you did in those processes for the methods. And then number 3, results and discussion. It explains the findings of the study or investigation. This is where you conclude, this is where you discuss your findings, this is where you elaborate the things that you found out after conducting some experiments or some lab experiments or observations. Now, so in text structures, in EAPP, we have 5 different types that we have to observe. So again, as readers and as possible writers of different text types under academic writing or informal writing, you have to be knowledgeable of these text structures so that you'll be able to know exactly the text structure that you are reading, and you'll be able to come up with your own text structure since you already know the pattern. The first text structure is called description. So I know that you have already tapped this or learned this from the reading and writing class, which I taught once, I think twice, 2 years for reading and writing skills. So it's somewhat related to this, but it's under, again, academic writing and formal written text. So let's discuss what description structure is. So description as a text structure is a type of text structure that features a detailed description of something to give the reader a mental picture. So it's like creating pictures in their minds and illustrating specific ideas in their minds, making them imagine things by not using a lot of flowery words, but formal words. Description, again, to give the readers a mental picture of what you are describing. So to exemplify, this is the example. Communication is a method of exchanging ideas or information with one another. This term comes from the Latin term communicate, meaning exchanging of ideas. It is not a one-way activity, but a two-way process. So if you will notice, this is a formal written text, and some of the lines that shows mental picture are as follows. Exchanging ideas or information, exchanging of ideas, one way but a two-way process. So you didn't use a lot of adjectives, flowery words, a lot of conventions for creative writing, but you were able to create picture, mental picture in the minds of your readers, and that's what description text structure is all about. Let's now move on to the second text structure type, which is the cause and effect. So under the text structure cause and effect, it presents the causal relationship between a specific event, idea, or concept, and the events, ideas, or concept that follow. So it shows the cause, and it also shows an effect in a formal way. So let's have an example. A person who widens his vocabulary by reading and improve his speaking through practice may improve his chances of communicating effectively. So this is again a formal written text, and the cause is by reading and to improve his speaking through practice may also improve his chances of communicating effectively. So whoever can widen the vocabulary by reading, improve his speaking through practice, will eventually have or experience the effect of communicating effectively. So that's what cause and effect structure looks like. Let's now proceed with the third text type, which is comparison and contrast. So again, the difference between these two words is when we compare, we find the similarities of both texts or both ideas, and when we contrast, we find the difference. So this type of text examines the similarities and differences between two or more people, events, concepts, ideas, and others. For example, communication may be expressed through speaking and writing. Both are considered productive skills because they allow production of sounds and symbols. However, they differ in terms of how they are being carried by people. So in this example, the words that is being compared and contrasted are speaking and writing. So first, in the second sentence that begins with the word both. So this is an example of comparison. There you are looking for similarities between speaking and writing, and then for however, they differ in terms of how they are being carried out by people. So it focuses on the differences. So if you will notice, to just apply our learnings in the previous lesson, we have the language observed here, the attributes observed here, like explicitness, and also I think caution language can also be part B1 because of the word may and some and such. So that's an example of comparison and contrast paragraph. The fourth text structure is what we call problem and solution, when we provide a problem and then we also provide solutions or identify some of the suggested things to do in order to solve a particular posed or raised problem in the text. So this type of structure sets up a problem or problems, explains the solution, and then discusses the effects of the solution. So we don't end by just explaining or laying out our solutions. We also discuss the effects of the solutions and how could it contribute or how can it contribute to the problem that we have raised. So, for example, if a person is shy in communicating, one has to look for ways on how he or she can motivate himself or herself to boost his or her confidence and find ways to improve through reading, writing, and practicing the language. So, since this paragraph or sample text is really long in the references, we opted to cut it until the language. So, it's only the problem, which is the person is shy in communicating, and the solutions are the person has to look for ways on how She can motivate herself and boost her confidence and find ways to improve through reading, writing, and practicing the language. Let's proceed to the last text structure, which is called order or sequence. So, in order or sequence, this text structure gives readers a chronological events or chronological order of events or a list of steps in a procedure. So, for example, in order to become an effective communicator, one has to consider the following. First, you need to become a wide reader. Then, you need to expose yourself in an environment where communication is practiced. And third, or finally, you need to practice. So, in this example, it's evident that you use some signal words or signposts for order or sequence, which are first, second, and third. And then after those signal words, you provide your sentence or the steps, the first, the second, the third steps, in order to provide a sequence of events or chronological order in sentences. So I hope that you learned something from the text structures that we have discussed. I opted to include this or discuss it with you because according to your teachers in grade 11, most of you are still confused with thesis statements, and actually the most common thesis statements that you can identify are only those found at the first sentence. So let's just explain what thesis statements are. So a thesis statement is a sentence used in an essay that serves as the guide for the essay and directly answers the question or task asked of you. So a thesis statement is a sentence that is used in the essay that tells you the main idea or that tells you the main highlight of a particular text structure. So this may come to an answer for a question or a specific answer for a task that is assigned for you to define or for you to explain. So you have to remember that a thesis statement is simply a factual statement, nor is not just a topic sentence. It has to be noted that the thesis statement is also considered the main idea. So it's not always the thesis statement. It's not always found in the first part of the sentence. You can put it anywhere you like it to put it, but these statements are more like statements, or it's a particular sentence that carries the main idea or the main core of your text or of the text that you have written. So thesis statements addresses the prompt clearly. So for example, you were asked of a question and you are addressing it through formal writing. Your main answer to that question is actually, or to that prompt is actually an example of thesis statement. So thesis statements can also make a claim or present an argument. So like if you are to write an opinionated or an opinion text, formal output or requirement, as a formal requirement in a particular subject, for example in campus journalism. So your claim or the sentence that carries the argument can also be the thesis statement. In the third line, it may be arguable if thesis is an opinion. So arguable in such a way that in academic writing, kaya nga diba in the first part of the lesson, in our first lesson, we are avoiding sweeping generalizations and such. So it's a bit arguable because sometimes what we write in our formal written text with thesis statement, with our thesis statements, are our own opinion. So maybe if you are going to base your written text in your opinion, because it's a requirement in one of your lessons or in one of your subjects, make sure to apply caution language again in your sentences or in your written text. So if you can still remember in our learning objectives a while ago, so it is noted there that in this lesson, all you need to do is to know or to determine the thesis statements in a written passage or in written passages. But the question is, where can we find thesis statements? So let's find out the placement of thesis statements in passages. So in order for you to find the placement of thesis statements, you have to know the writing method used in a paragraph. So the first writing method is inductive method. In this writing method, it starts with a particular to general idea. This means that the paragraph progresses from specific details at first and the first part, and then the conclusions or generalizations are placed at the end of the text. Usually in this inductive format, we can find the thesis statements in literally the first part of the sentence. So since you are going to answer a prompt, or you are to answer or to relay your answers for a particular topic and follow an inductive format, so from specific to general, the specific ones usually contains your thesis statement. So in this sentence, the typical Filipino is short, brown, and flat-nosed. He cannot live without his rice, but he isn't allergic to bread. Arroz a la Valenciana, pancit and spaghetti. He educates his youth in foreign languages, furnishes his home. Hoover, RCA apes the latest fashion from New York and Paris, argues in the world in almost flawless English. His Alameda is almost a Parisian by now, and his villa has found his home in America. Indeed, the Filipino may be Oriental in looks, but Occidental in more ways than one. So, if you will notice, the thesis statement is the first line or the first sentence because it tackles the main idea, which is or who is a typical Filipino. So, typical Filipino is the topic in this sentence. That's why in the remaining sentences of this example, it always uses the pronoun he because it refers to the main topic again, which is the typical Filipino. And if you will notice, the conclusion of this part is seen at the last part of the sentence, which is, or of the paragraph, which says, indeed, the Filipino may be Oriental in looks, but Occidental in more ways than one. So this is a conclusion and an example of inductive format or inductive method. So let's now move on with the deductive method of writing. So in this method of writing, the question is, where can we find the thesis statement? So let us first discuss its meaning. So deductive it's the opposite of induction or the inductive format. This writing method starts from general to specific, which means that conclusions are presented first before presenting the support ideas or the specific details. So under the deductive format, you can now find the thesis statement in the conclusion and not in the specific sentence. Unlike in the inductive format, you can find the thesis statement in the specific idea, but in here, you find it into the general idea, which is there are many kinds of movie tests. So that's a generalized version or a generalized idea because the remaining parts of the sentence are elaborating or expounding more on the kinds of movie tests. So there are the storytellers who have developed the habit of seeing the movie. There are nutcrackers. We also have mother hens. And lastly, there are wandering Jews. So in this type of format, in writing, you don't do conclusions because in this passage, the conclusion is already seen at the first line. There are many kinds of movie pests. And again, this is the thesis statement because it carries the main topic or the main idea, which is movie pests or the kinds of movie pests. Okay? Now, in writing passages, we also follow the deductive-inductive format. So, since we have two words already, it's a combination of the first two methods. So, this pattern starts from a general statement, proceeds in discussing the specific details in the middle of the text, and ends with a recapitulation of the generalized statement at the end. So, if you will notice in the deductive format in the second example, there is no generalized statement. So the generalized statement is found on top, and then afterwards it proceeded with the specific ideas and it ended the passage there. But in here, in the deductive-inductive method, we begin with the general statement, specific details, and a generalized statement at the end. So let's see for an example. So this is the example of the deductive-inductive format. So don't worry, you are not going to identify the format of a passage. So we are just telling you that if you know the format of each passages, you'll be able to decide or to spot the thesis statement. So in this example, in the combination of the two, the thesis statement is found right in the middle of the sentence, which says, indeed, in the slums of the third world, as in ghettos in the United States of America and France, a daily battle for the pitifully simple but basic necessities of life goes on. So this might probably confuse you, as you may think that this is about the growing army of the homeless in the Philippines, but it's not. So if you will notice in the first two sentences, it talks about homeless continues to clutter in the Philippine cities, and we have squatters that fight tooth and nail in order to survive. So this is somewhat related to the third world slums, or the slums of the third world countries, which is the main topic. So if in the latter part of the sentence, life dehumanizes its unfortunate peasant migrants, inhabitant crowd, single-room windowless shacks. We have made mention of undergrowth of trees for toilets, pigs wait to gobble them up, tourists sleeping under cardboard sheeting, heaps of rags, warehouses, and construction sites. So if you will notice, at the first part and the last part of the sentence, it all boils down to the slums, or the situations, specific situations of the slums, of the people living in the slums of the third world country. So that's our thesis statement. So now we have the inductive-deductive combination. So if we have deductive-inductive, we now have inductive-deductive, where it starts with the specific and then presents a generalized statement or conclusion at the middle, and then proceeds in discussing additional information or support details towards the end, which is following the structure specific, general to specific again. Unlike for deductive and inductive, we follow general, specific, general. For inductive, we follow specific, generalized, and general, and specific, going back to specific again. So let's have the example. So for example, flowers occupy a very important role in man's life. He beautifies his home with loveliest daisies, welcomes a visitor with the sweetest sleigh, conveys his congratulations with sprays and orchids. He gladdens his sick friends with the daintiest carnations and such. So the thesis statement is literally, flowers occupy a very important role in the man's life. So you will know, you can really find the thesis statement exactly in the sentence if you'll know how to identify the topic of the sentence. So all you need to do, if you are confused with the topic, all you need to do is to observe the remaining sentences. If they are specific and if they are referring to a particular generalized term or a specific term, like for example, in this example, we follow a specific, generalized, specific format, where flowers occupy a very important role in a man's life, is considered a specific sentence in this setting. So the thesis statement is, flowers occupy a very important role in the man's life, and it's followed by still specific ideas in the examples. So as the example progresses, we can also find another thesis statement. So we can find the thesis statement, indeed, man is born and welcomed into this world with bouquet of flowers. So in this example, we can find two thesis statements. The first part, the thesis statement, talks about the flowers, and the second part talks about the man, how the man is born and welcomed to this world with bouquet of flowers. How did you know that this is a thesis statement? Because it has been elaborated by the remaining sentences, like to commemorate his birthday with a fragrant rose spray, with red rose, marries with orange blossoms scenting in the air, and finally dies with a wreath of flowers in his grave. Another thing is the story of love is in every petal of a forget-me-not, and the fairness of a maiden is in every violet almost hidden from the eye. So, it's actually sandwiched with the supporting details, all pointing out to the highlighted sentence, which is again the second thesis statement of the example under this type of text structure, or under this type of format. So now we are down with our final format, which is hinted or implied. So based on the word itself, or the words that I've read, it's actually hinted and implied, meaning there's no general statement that you can identify a particular thesis statement. So let's discuss. The most different among these methods, this pattern does not directly present a generalized statement or conclusion, which means that the writer leaves it to the audience to conclude and make generalized statements about the ideas presented in text. So for hinted and implied, you cannot identify or point out specifically where the thesis statement is located because it's actually implied and it's not written within the words. So to exemplify, I sank into the first chair at the entrance hall, proffed to me by an unsmiling guard. I waited as he checked his list of expected visitors, after which he pressed a button in front of his desk and a voice came through. They talked in whispers. I asked to present my ID, and the guard looked me over. Look at my ID, and he smiled this time. He motioned me to enter, but not until I surrendered my ID to him, and in return, he gave me a visitor's ID, blank, blank, blank. Okay, so let me not read the entire passage. So in this example, all you can see are specifics. There are no generalized thing. There are no starting sentence that tells you what this is about. So this is actually an example of implied and hinted format, meaning if you encounter this sentence or passage, you will not be able to identify the specific thesis statement, which means that it's up to you for you to decide or to think about the thesis statement that you may use or you can use to provide one for this example. So that's it. So I guess we're through with the discussion part. So let me just explain what will happen in our synchronous time. So on our next meeting, which will be on Tuesday or on Thursday, it will be a very quick synchronous exercise. Well, I will be asking you to use another app for discussion. So I hope that you were able to watch the video and observe the discussion, because in the synchronous exercise, I'll be asking you questions. There will be exchange of ideas before we proceed with our main activity. So to explain what we will be doing, since we have 2 lessons in one week, because it's actually embedded in the MELC. The main MELC is on text structure, and its underlying MELC or another objective still for week 2 is thesis statement. So actually there's still another one which is about summary, but since you can already do summary very well, we have already decided to skip that part. So for going back for worksheets, you have one worksheet only with A and B activities. So all you need to do is to answer the items for worksheet 1 uploaded in the classroom. This activity should be done individually, since again you have requested for an individual task, though it's really hard for me to check, but since that's your request, I will grant it over to you. So this should be done individually and should be submitted in the room. So just a piece of advice: when you submit your output, make sure that you submit not in PDF format. Please submit it through Google Google Docs format pa rin, so that I will be able to provide comments. And when I return the comments to you, all you need to do is just read them, or maybe not. You just identify your scores, or you just look for your scores, and that's it. No need to return it back to me because I have already graded your outputs. So as early as Monday, I am announcing that you have to keep your heads up for our short quiz, and this will be done in our asynchronous time. So if your synchronous time is on Tuesday for Tesla and Berzelius, you'll be taking the quiz on Wednesday. And for Faraday, since our synchronous time is on Thursday, you'll be taking the quiz on Friday. So this is actually indicated in our course outline if you have downloaded it. So you know for a fact that we will have a quiz, the first quiz for the quarter. So the coverage for this quiz are lessons for weeks 1 and 2, which is about language use in academic texts, text structures, and thesis statement. So I hope that you'll be able to revise or review for this quiz, and I hope that you'll be able to access our schedule of weekly learning tasks, so you will be guided with what will happen for our week, or the activities that we are to do in the week. And that ends our recorded video lesson for week 2 and 3, which tackled about text structures and thesis statements. Thank you for listening, and thank you for giving time in your subject English for academic and professional purposes. So if you have any other questions after watching this video, you can actually put it or post it in the Q&A thread, or simply message me through the following accounts. Thank you very much for watching EAPP Tributes. Have a great day ahead. Goodbye!